People love shopping online, but sometimes you want to see the item. And frankly, there's a lot of people who maybe don't know about me, but they go to the mall and now they can see me there. So I think you need to at least continue to be building up skills and experimenting across the key channels. I think if you don't have a direct-to-consumer offering, I would definitely think that's something I'd want to experiment with.
This is the Ecommerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kiri Masters from Bobsled Marketing, and today we're running an interview that I did at the shop.org retail conference in Las Vegas a couple of months ago. And this interview is with Ken Fenyo from Fuel by McKinsey. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a second. But Ken was moderating a panel at the event called Industry Trendcasting, What to Know Today About What to Do Tomorrow in the retail industry, of course. So on this panel, Ken moderated with some industry experts. There were a few trends that popped up they were all talking about, and it was particularly relevant at the shop.org show because so much of the retail industry today is thinking about technology and what kind of insights data can bring to their business, what kind of insights they can get from connecting with their customers on platforms that they want to, like through Facebook Messenger and through chatbots and things like that, and a lot about personalized marketing as well. So these are the things that I get into a conversation with Ken about. I also talk with Ken about his background prior to Fuel by McKinsey as the CEO of a digital coupon technology company, and also just some takeaways for consumer product brands that are not necessarily retailers per se, not necessarily having a network of their own stores, which a lot of these discussions are generally geared towards. But what about consumer product brands that are selling on marketplaces like Amazon, selling through their own e-com site, selling to retail partners? What kind of insights did he have about the way that technology is moving and what types of technology and trends brands need to be aware of as well? So we had a really good conversation. It's pretty on the scale of what we talk about on this show, definitely higher level, more blue sky kind of strategy conversation rather than tactical, do this, then do that. So on that scale, definitely more of a big picture episode. I hope you enjoy that. And just to segue into the interview, a little bit of background about Ken. Ken leads the Fuel by McKinsey consumer markets team, developing client relationships, benchmarking tools, and knowledge for business to consumer e-commerce, marketplace, and digital media companies. And just as a side note as well, it's something that he mentioned during our conversation, but if you go to fuelbymckinsey.com, there's a tool called Consumer Radar, and that is a proprietary benchmarking tool that's available to e-commerce startups and gives you lots of really great insight about what's going on in your sort of area of e-commerce. Back to Ken. Ken is the former CEO of U Technology, the largest retail digital coupon network in the US, and former VP of loyalty at Kroger, the largest supermarket retailer in the US, where he was responsible for loyalty programs, digital marketing, e-commerce, customer insights and analytics, and pricing strategy. Ken is passionate about how technology is changing how, when, and where we shop. And when he isn't running Fuel by McKinsey's consumer markets team, he runs, bakes bread, and tries to keep up with his 3 kids. So I'm going to come back after the interview with Ken, call out a few takeaways of my own, but I hope you enjoy this high-level strategic trend casting conversation with Ken Fenyo. Okay, great. So I'm here today with Ken Fenyo. We're at shop.org 2018. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So is this your first podcast interview? Have you done any of these?
It is not my first podcast interview. It is the first time I've been to shop.org, though.
Okay, yep. And how have you found the show?
So far, it's been interesting. Definitely seems to get a wide variety of folks, and it's definitely been an interesting experience so far.
So you moderated a panel today, which I got to sit in on, called Industry Trend Casting, What Do You Need to Do Today and Know About Tomorrow?
That's right.
So can you give the audience a quick recap of the things that you talked about today with your panelists?
Sure. Maybe I'll consolidate. The three panels each had pretty different topics they covered. So just to consolidate, it seems like there's three larger trends that we're seeing in the industry. They're not the only ones because it's such a diverse space, but the three I think are very interesting to look at. One is around automation. So you're increasingly seeing both on the consumer end as well on the B2B side, people look more into how to automate the things that they're doing. So on the consumer side, it starts to be more about how do I automate my replenishment? So rather than having to every week buy the same set of items, can I set it, with in a way that I can just get it delivered to me when I need it? Increasingly there'll be sensors in my products that determine I'm running low, and then I'll get a chance to rebuy it that way. On the business side, you're seeing significant investment in automation technology, both in the store, right? So to detect when something's out of stock, cleaning and the like, as well as in the supply chain. The second area is around the experience. And so you're seeing a lot of new technologies trying to make it a much more engaging experience, both in the store and online. The AR and VR, contextual commerce, about using voice and social media to make it a much more engaging experience. One of the speakers talked about how Instagram was becoming increasingly a place people went for product search, which, even more so than at Amazon, which is interesting because I think most of the time you hear that almost all the product searches start on Amazon.
Definitely the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, that was the same as well. But I guess the answer is it's a huge platform. And I certainly know from my kids that they're much more likely to be on Instagram trying to find looks, which can lead to shopping, than even going to Amazon. And within the store, I think you're seeing a lot around the experience. Think about like Amazon Go is the one that gets a lot of attention. And there's a range of startups trying to create the same experience. But the idea is if I can get rid of checkout, I can really make it a much more engaging experience. People walk in, get what they need, walk out. And then the third area I'd say is around personalization. Some of it's stuff we've done for a while. So previously, I'd ran loyalty and e-commerce at Kroger, which is a large grocery chain. We took all the data we collected about what you bought and did a range of really personalized marketing to you. And so that's been around for a while. I think what you're seeing is much more with, on the one hand, AI, really making it a lot more close to what you really want and being even predictive, right? So it's easy to figure out you buy Tide, let me give you an offer for Tide. It's a lot harder to know I like a certain style of sweater or shoe, right? And increasingly we're able to use data to do that. And then, things like 3D printing, is increasingly going to, start seeing in the marketplace where instead of just getting a generic shirt, I can get something made for me at a time or shoe. Yeah. You're certainly seeing already with there's a lot of now custom design businesses for suits, on the men's side at least, for suits and shirts, where again, you can take advantage of the internet. A friend of mine just was buying us shirts and suit where he took some pictures of himself with his mobile phone. Those got uploaded, and then that's what they used to figure out what sizing you needed across all the dimensions.
I haven't done an extensive walkthrough of all the exhibitors here, but that's a lot of the customized apparel companies are doing. And they're doing I've seen bodysuits which have sensors on them, and they actually...
Yes, I saw that as well.
Sensors. And then you've got the body scanning technology through a mobile app, and it's measuring, your ratios and things like that to do.
So the ones I've bought personally have been some inserts for my running shoes.
Okay.
But same idea. You use your mobile phone to take some pictures of your feet, and then from that they're able to create effectively a 3D model of your feet, and then they 3D print actually the insole that they then send to you. So it becomes a much cheaper way of getting a very customized product that are kind of tailored to you.
Yeah.
So I think those are the three big trends. There are a few other things like international, I think is going to become increasingly important. It depends obviously on your scale, whether you're ready to go international. But a few people, one of the speakers talked about the idea that you could be a local merchant, sign up with Amazon, and Amazon could actually distribute your product around the world, even though, you're in Sheboygan, wherever you are.
Oh, that there's a few more steps in between.
It always sounds better on stage to say, wave your magic wand and it happens.
Yeah, in reality, they do take care of all the logistics of shifting inventory between countries, but you still, if you're selling in the EU, you still need to have VAT and the local agent filing your, doing all the compliance on a quarterly basis. And you still actually need to set up VAT registration with each EU market. So these are all the details no one wants to talk about.
I like the idea. That's a bit disappointing, but I like the idea I could just put my product out to the world, but that makes sense too. It doesn't surprise me.
It's a lot easier than it was 5 years ago, that's for sure.
That's certainly true of a general trend, right, which is it's just easier to make product, it's easier to distribute product, and I think it sort of drives some of the complexity and challenges for businesses now to stay ahead.
Yeah, and that's the fascinating thing about coming to shop.org for the first time for both of us, is just there's retailers and then there's technology providers and vendors, and it's really, there's so much of an appetite for for learning what's new, what's coming up, what's going to be, what are these trends that we need to be looking at so that these retailers can stay ahead of the game.
Exactly.
Very hungry for new technology and information and an edge that they can get.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I think it's just hard, whether you're a brand or a retailer, to just sit still. I think we've certainly seen it across the markets, right? Things are changing so fast that if you're not experimenting, it's very hard to, even with things just sort of just starting, take something like, I don't know, augmented reality, right? Or virtual reality, which you might look at and say, well, so few people have headsets. Why am I going to waste my time? The problem is once it sort of clicks, if you're not been kind of getting your hands around where you can really use it, it's hard once it goes mainstream to catch up at that point. So you really need to be at least understanding the where things are going and beginning to experiment with the things you think can have the most value for you.
Yes, that's a great point. And we've been talking a lot about voice commerce for the last year, and there's some recent data that's come out to say, hey, no one's really using voice for shopping, not for first purchases, maybe for repurchases. And so this new data came out that showed people just aren't really using it.
I saw that as well.
Initial, yeah. But the point is, like you said, you can't just say, okay, let's just leave voice alone because it's not ever going to work. It is going to work, and it's the people that are using it now that are collecting data and understanding what is voice SEO and how do we get in front of it. Even though it's still quite nascent now, it's not going to be nascent in 5 years.
Right, and I think that fits with the general trend of all this. There's a range of ways people are beginning to want to shop off of your website or mobile app, right? So there's voice, there's text. I know companies who have built entire loyalty programs on WeChat. Increasingly people want to be able to shop in a variety of forms. Instagram might be another one, right, where I'm seeing a look and I just want to buy it right then. And I think if you're not beginning to figure out how to make that work for your business so you don't get disintermediated, so you can maximize the value, now's the time to be doing that when the stakes are low. When somebody figures out how to really do it, you don't want to be playing catch up.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. So I'd like to dive into your professional background a little bit. And so you're the consumer markets lead at Fuel by McKinsey. What is Fuel by McKinsey?
That's a good question. So Fuel by McKinsey is a group within McKinsey. We're kind of a startup within McKinsey that focuses on pre-IPO companies and their investors. We also work with some larger of our clients who are trying to figure out how to innovate by working with startups. And that could be everything from creating an investment arm to doing M&A to just figuring out how do I find interesting companies and then pilot and possibly scale with them if they have technology that fits for me. So, and I focus primarily on consumer e-commerce, consumer services. I still do a lot of retail tech as work as well because I have a background in retail.
Yeah, and they're so closely related.
Yeah, and it's, I think for McKinsey, it's a chance to say, with all the disruption happening, we can't just work for our large Fortune 500 companies and customers without realizing there's some real innovation and disruption happening at the smaller company level. And so I think we want to start serving those companies earlier. It also provides us great knowledge and insight into what's happening in the markets when we do advise our larger clients so that hopefully we're adding value both to the startups as well as to the bigger companies.
So you providing McKinsey services essentially to those small?
Yeah, so we do a range of things, some of which are fairly traditional. We do provide consulting on a range of issues, pricing, market entry, customer loyalty programs, all that sort of thing. We have a sort of a model. It's a little more agile model. It's quicker within a budget that fits better with a startup company. We're also trying to create a range of ways that we can engage smaller companies or companies that have less budget for a big consulting gig. So we have something called Fuel Access that's more of a kind of an ask an expert kind of functionality where if you have a very specific question, hey, we're thinking of going to Europe, but trying to figure out, do we want to be in the UK or France or Germany as a headquarters? We have folks who have addressed those questions that can kind of very quickly help you get through them. We have something called McKinsey Academy that's more of a training. So you could use your credit card to sign up yourself or your team to get, how to improve your sales planning, things like that. And then we have some things just like benchmarking tools. So right now we're working on a consumer e-commerce benchmarking tool. So for, companies from, call it like 10 to 100 million in revenue, what's sort of best in class in terms of marketing and, return on investment and structure. So, and that's free to the people who participate. So I think we're trying to come up with ways, from seed up to, the brink of IPO, as well as from sort of just, where you are in terms of your needs, so that we offer a variety of ways we can help.
Great. I'd love to link up to some of those tools in our show notes.
Definitely share you some material later.
Good. And so are these companies typically VC backed or some privately owned?
I would say most are VC backed. In fairness, I live in Silicon Valley, and so it tends to be most of the companies there have raised money. I mean, it is the case that there are a large number of growth companies, that never took VC money or took mostly angel dollars. So we don't really think about it in terms of funding. We're looking more for companies that could use some help scaling their business or continuing the growth they're already on. Most of them probably are venture backed, just because that's typically the way things get funded these days, but it's not exclusive.
Got it. And so prior to McKinsey, you were the CEO of You Technology, which is the retail industry's largest digital coupon network. So at the time, at least, back when you were CEO, was it technology focused on serving digital coupons to be used in brick and mortar locations?
Yes. That's where we started. So we integrated with the retailer point of sale system, partnered them with the retailer and the consumer packaged good companies. We primarily were in the food, mass, drug area.
Okay.
And so the idea was you could then load coupon onto your loyalty card or, any other identifier that you had and get your savings. So rather having to go to the Sunday paper and clip, you could much more automate the process. And so we worked with a range of large retailers like Kroger and ShopRite in New Jersey and, almost all the big CPG companies. We did over time, though, start getting more. So we did work with Fresh Direct on the e-commerce side. And so we were beginning to get then into more of the e-commerce side of providing coupons there. So we started on the brick and mortar, but it wasn't like we were only looking at that.
You moved ahead with the time.
And the dynamics are a bit different in terms of, when you're looking at e-commerce versus brick and mortar. But I think the idea was ultimately, how do you make the couponing, bring it into the 21st century? So how do you make it a more engaging and easy to use way? And then when you go digital, one of the biggest advantages, it really helps you make it a much more personalized experience. So you can kind of get away from here's a 50 cents off some item that's in the Sunday paper and everyone gets it, to here's something that's unique to you because I know you buy this, or maybe we think you'll like it for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask about, was how you'd seen that shift over time, because coupons are a very traditional.
Yep.
Clip it out of the paper and take it to the retailer. But now, in my world, Amazon's coupons are one of the most effective promotional tools that they have for merchants. People like coupons, they really do.
Well, and it is a way for people who want an item but are very price sensitive. They can get a bit more savings. The e-commerce one's interesting because arguably you should have less breakage on them, right? If you're looking at an item and there's a coupon, why wouldn't you take the coupon? In brick and mortar setting, there's a lot more. In the paper world, there's a lot more about, did I bother to clip it? Did I leave it at home? And so I didn't use it because I forgot it or expired. But I think the same dynamic are the same, which is, if you can give a relevant offer to somebody who's thinking about an item but isn't sure, they're definitely motivating for a good part of the market. I think when I looked at it, when I was at Kroger and we were doing this, there was about 10% of the market were really heavy couponers. So they would be the ones who would have 10, 20 coupons when they checked out. There's about 10% of the market who would never use a coupon. I used to joke that I think you could try to hand them a coupon right before they paid and they would still tell you no. And then most of the people were in the middle. They would use a coupon whenever they could and they loved the value, but they weren't necessarily going to go crazy finding every in and out to get one. But I think on the online world, they work as well. And like I said, online has an advantage is it allows you to be much more personalized. So if you're thinking about, it could be maybe an item I know you buy, but I want you to buy more of it from me. It could be you've bought a similar item, or you buy an item in a certain category, but you're not buying something else from me. So if you're buying pasta, you're probably buying pasta sauce somewhere, but you're not buying from me. So maybe I can get you in the category. And then ultimately, particularly with some of the advanced technology, we're getting better at doing things like, we think you're going to like some new item and let's make you an offer for it. And so I think they they've the tried and true method, even in the digital age.
Yeah, it's been something that's really stuck. So we're here at shop.org, and a big part of the event is all the exhibitors who are demonstrating and sometimes launching new technology. And so I know you haven't had a chance to walk the floor so much, but what kind of technology are you seeing in 2018, some of which is here, that you think retailers are finding interesting now?
I definitely think voice and text, are continuing to be big drivers of interest. I think this whole idea that we can start having a conversation, is important, whether that be through voice or whether it be through text. And I'm sure there's things like text bots and others that allow you to use AI to automate some of those conversations are interesting. They're going to kill me as I forget the name, but I just saw some interesting things of. Well, let me stop. So then I think there's one around the whole idea of how do I engage my shoppers more and have a conversation with them, I think is one. I think a second one is sort of that how do you blend online and offline is a big trend. So there's one, I think Hero was the one I had met with, which won one of the awards this morning. But it's kind of an interesting way of saying, I need help, I'm online. And then they actually link you with a store associate, right, who can answer your questions. It's remote, and they can use video chat to, show you the item. So maybe the answer is, does this run small or not? You can take, and part of the reason of connecting with somebody at a local store is value, because then if you want to come in later and actually try it on, have a connection to that store and it helps you drive you in. But, and you see certain other things like, more interactive shelving, things like that, AR, VR, which, as well, all that sort of, how do I kind of blend a bit of the online and offline experience? And I'd say the third area, which I'm not sure is in much here, but this idea of how can I make the whole experience easier and more efficient? So like I said, there's a number of startups we're seeing investing in things like automated checkout or frictionless checkout, similar to an Amazon Go, right, where I can walk in, I pick my items, I walk out, I don't have to ever check out. And that relies on computer vision, mostly sometimes the sensors. And so I think what you're seeing is there's a lot of innovation in, how can I use AI and machine learning to both provide a better experience, but then also I'm using it to streamline my operations. Right, because not only is everyone going to love the idea I don't have to wait to check out, but obviously that frees up a lot of resources I could invest, for example, into more store associates to answer questions or lower product price or however you want to make that investment. So
yeah, I'm staying here at the Venetian, and so they have in the minibar, it's like as soon as you pick up the beverage, it's billed.
Yes, they're nice that way.
They did explain that very clearly when you check in, but.
Yeah.
They're even using that kind of just walk out technology in hotels like this one. So yeah, I was they were very quick to bill my $5 bottle of water.
Exactly.
And it was all with the sensors.
Only $5. That was good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what you're seeing too is because of the increasing use of cameras and the ability to use them, it used to be in the retail setting, in the store at least, you really didn't know how people shop the store.
Right.
Online, it, right? You can get all the clickstream data, right? And you can really use that to make sure you're being as effective in your experience as you can be. In the store, it used to be, well, you knew it's sold, but you had no idea, like, how many people went to the shelf and didn't buy anything, how many people picked it up and put it back, how many people couldn't find it. And so I think increasingly you're getting some of that data available that I think will help retailers in brick and mortar do a much better job of, what assortment should I have? How should I design my stores? And so that's definitely a technology we're seeing getting adopted much more.
Yeah, there was one of the exhibitors that I interviewed is a company called Flex Receipts, and they are taking the receipt from the store and sending it to customers digitally, but then they're able to match up the online and offline records and build a better picture about who this person is and what their preferences are. It's moving very quickly. Interesting way.
Well, it sort of remains the fact that retailers, collect more data than they know what to do with. And I think as you see some of the technology emerge, is helping them get more value out of all that data.
Yes, absolutely. So kind of shifting gears to some practical questions here. Given your visibility of macro retail trends, what advice do you have for more like mid-market size brands who are grappling with the various sales channels, so marketplaces, D2C, brick and mortar? Where should they be focusing their attention now to position themselves for the future?
It's sort of a tough one because, there's not, historically you'd always be like, we get really focused on the one thing you're going to do well, right? You're going to be, we sell, and this is why so many of the consumer packaged good companies sell just through, through wholesale, right?
Because they got good at it.
They got really good at it, very efficient. They knew how to, and I think it's harder to do these days. Like, I don't think you can be one thing, both because I think you want to be where your customers are, and the customers increasingly
Absolutely.
are customers. So it's why you see so many, I think you see so many direct to consumer brands now opening retail stores, right? Because they know that, yes, people love shopping online, but sometimes you want to see the item. And frankly, there's a lot of people who maybe don't know about me, but they go to the mall and now they can see me there. So I think you need to at least continue to be building up skills and experimenting across the key channels. I think if you don't have a direct-to-consumer offering, I would definitely think that's something I'd want to experiment with. I've talked to some of the larger consumer brands around this, and there's a lot of reluctance because it's such a shift in their business model. But I think even if you do it almost as like a company-owned store where I don't do a lot of my sales that way, but the ability to really understand the consumer at a deep level, I think is often missing for a lot of people who just sell through wholesale, right? Because you don't have that real connect. The retailer has it, but you don't. And I think you can use the direct-to-consumer channel to kind of build more of that expertise and experience that you can then leverage elsewhere. I think a few things we're seeing that I think are worth knowing is, ultimately, I think a lot of the skills to build around being really good at capturing data and using data, because I think there's really no way around really understanding your consumers, right? It's, again, it's why so many consumer packaged goods companies struggling. Is they kind of miss the boat on a range of consumer trends. And so I think, what you need to see is this ability, I'm going to capture data directly. I'm going to partner to get some of the data, leverage things from the web. And I think you have to really use that to start to understand like what's really happening in the market. Ideally, you're using that data to create one-to-one relationships. So how are you thinking about your CRM strategies? But I think it's very hard in the day if you're not building that profile and then using it and personalizing the experience, you're going to wind up, that to me is a real key driver of future success, is the ability to capture data and then, personalize whether it's the marketing or the experience when you come to the website or, ideally when you go to the store. So that'd be one. I think another one is around, and it's a little more, less for the digitally native companies, but we're sort of seeing the next wave of digital coming through. And so if originally it was, well, I need a website, I need a mobile app, I've got to be selling online. Increasingly it becomes, how do I actually change my business to be digital? Right? Because it's still amazing. If you look at most companies, even some direct-to-consumer ones, they're very analog in how they run their business, right? And so, how do I reform every practice, right? Accounting, how do I work with my vendors? How do I engage with employees? There's a lot of opportunity to kind of be creative about whether you do it through a design thinking model or you're partnering around it. But I think people have to really think about, it's not just about having a good website, but you actually have to change how you do business to be more agile and flexible, and also to free up money to invest in other activities you want to do.
Yeah, that's a really great point. There's a CPG company I've been speaking with about, they want to move from entirely selling wholesale to brick and mortar and starting to sell on Amazon. And for them, it's not just a flick of a switch. Like, they have to remodel their entire operations process in the warehouse so that they can have, case packs ready to go to Amazon, being packaged correctly and routing them through a different shipping profile. And so it's a huge move just to get a relatively small subsection of their assortment onto Amazon. And to your point around getting user data, I'm glad that you mentioned D2C, because with marketplaces like Amazon, you don't get
that's true.
Hardly any customer data. I mean, it's still a step up from selling on a wholesale basis to stores, because you do understand search patterns, buying patterns, maybe a little bit of geographical information, but you're not getting, that customer is not yours. So Amazon's not going to give you that data.
Well, and it's hard. I mean, ultimately, you want to be where your customers are. And if you're, there's a lot of people who like shopping on Amazon. So, certainly you've seen some brands remain off of Amazon. Some, like Nike's announced right there, now selling on Amazon as well as I think they announced Jet as well. Right. I think you have to pick where you're going to do it and which products make the most sense. But I think, just sort of saying, well, I'm not going to do certain channels is hard, particularly when they're high volume ones where, lots of your customers are otherwise shopping.
And you're kind of saying to the customer as well, I don't really care what your preference is. You have to go to the store to get my product.
Exactly.
And so for every brand that says that, there's another one waiting in the wings that's focused on, we just need to be where our customers want to buy the product.
And I think one thing the web has done for it is people are much more impatient.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't want to necessarily, they want to buy it the way they want to buy it. And, certainly unless you really have a strong and unique brand, there's usually something else that people will buy instead of you if they don't think you're really providing the kind of experience they're looking for.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, well, you can get so targeted with advertising now that you can take someone's branded search term and target that. And, if your competitor's kind of sleeping on the job with marketplaces, it's yours for the taking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Anything else you want to leave us with today?
No, I think this is great. I mean, I appreciate your, inviting me in, and I think it's definitely a fast-paced times.
Yeah.
But, I think it also creates a lot of opportunities for companies, right? Whether it's to, reach a new customer audiences or build deeper relationships. So while you hear a lot about the risks and the disruption, I mean, I think it also does create a lot of opportunities, particularly for, as you mentioned, the mid-market and smaller brands. I think it also creates a lot of opportunities to find new ways to grow. So it's exciting times as well.
Sure is. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Well, that was a great conversation with Ken, and thank you, Ken, for coming on the show. I wanted to just do a quick recap of some of the topics that we talked about and what kind of takeaways there are for brands selling on marketplaces, direct to consumer, and to retail partners. So one is this concept of technology being, in some cases, the types of technology we're talking about seem so distant, especially if you're a smaller brand and there's so many other priorities rather than looking at what role will voice commerce have to play in the shopping experience in 5 years' time. So it is tempting to kind of just put all the future technology stuff to the side and focus on how people are shopping today. And I'd say that that's a big trap of just considering how people shop today is the way that they're always going to shop in the future. So this is something that a lot of the traditional retailers and brands said about Amazon 5, 10, even just a couple of years ago, where almost every category at some point proclaimed they were Amazon proof, or that people didn't want to buy groceries online, or people didn't want to buy fashion online. People didn't want to buy, almost every category has made that argument that our customers want to see, feel, touch our products in stores. They don't want to buy them online. And just looking at every category since then, including food, including fashion, including B2B, industrial kind of products, these are all things that people are buying online. And a big theme of this show is not about doing what you think customers should do or how they should behave or where they should be shopping, but meeting shoppers where they want to be and with the tools that they want to be using. So if people are wanting to use voice commerce to research products, to repurchase them, things that they've bought before, if they want to be using digital coupons, if they want to be buying their first purchase in a retail store and then repurchasing it online, which is a big finding from some recent research from Salesforce, then that's got implications for you as a brand. Maybe you're thinking about still using all of your retail channels to the fullest extent that you can, but recognizing that, yes, we still need a physical retail footprint, and we're going to work with our partners on that. But where people ultimately want to repurchase those products for replenishable items is on marketplaces. So let's make sure our core assortment is available on marketplaces just like it is in stores. So that was a big takeaway for me from talking with Ken, is that these distant technological advances really aren't so distant. And if you're going to get ahead of how and what and where people are going to be shopping in the future, it does make sense to pay attention to this stuff. So that is it for today. Just wanted to catch up on this really great conversation I had a couple of months ago. A few other episodes had to jump the queue in terms of timeliness, but it was a really great event, the shop.org event, and I will keep you all posted on which events we're going to in 2019. And again, if you want more information about what Ken does and what Fueled by McKinsey does for these pre-IPO companies and larger companies looking to innovate. Their website is fuelbymckinsey.com. Thanks, and I'll catch you next week.